The question dominating Tehran since the first strikes of the war between Iran, the United States, and Israel is simple, yet deeply unsettling. Who is really in charge of Iran? On paper, the structure of power appears clear and familiar. Mujtaba Khamenei has assumed the position of supreme leader after the death of his father, Ali Khamenei, who was killed during the initial wave of attacks on February 28. In the Islamic Republic system, the supreme leader is not just a symbolic figure, but the ultimate authority, the one who defines the direction of the state, commands the armed forces, and has the final say over war, peace, and negotiations. But the reality unfolding behind the scenes tells a far more complicated and fragile story. Since taking power, Mujtaba Khamenei has remained almost entirely out of sight. There have been no public appearances, no televised speeches, and no direct communication with the Iranian people. Only a handful of written statements have been released in his name, carefully distributed through official channels. Reports from within Iran suggest that he was seriously wounded during the initial strikes, suffering burns and injuries that have made speaking difficult and limited his mobility. While officials insist that he remains mentally sharp and involved, the physical and security constraints surrounding him have fundamentally altered how leadership functions in Tehran. In Iran's political culture, leadership is not only about holding authority, but also about demonstrating it. His father, Ali Khamenei, mastered this balance over decades. Through speeches, symbolic appearances, and carefully timed interventions, he signaled direction to competing factions within the system. He acted as the final arbiter, resolving disputes and maintaining coherence across the political, military, and religious institutions. That signaling mechanism is now largely absent. Without it, different power centers are left to interpret the leader's intentions on their own, creating a system that is functioning but increasingly fragmented. This fragmentation is visible across every layer of governance. Former US President Donald Trump has described Iran's leadership as fractured, suggesting that Washington is waiting for Tehran to present a unified position before moving forward with any serious negotiations. Inside Iran, officials have tried to counter this perception by projecting unity, even sending coordinated messages to citizens emphasizing that there are no divisions between hardliners and moderates, only one national direction. But beneath that messaging lies a much more complex reality. Diplomatic institutions continue to operate, but their influence appears limited. Abbas Araghchi remains the official face of Iran's negotiations, working under President Masoud Pezeshkian. However, both figures seem to be operating within constraints rather than shaping the overall strategy. Araghchi's role has increasingly become technical and reactive rather than strategic. This was clearly illustrated when he made conflicting statements about the status of the Strait of Hormuz, first suggesting it had reopened and then quickly retracting that claim. Such inconsistencies reveal a deeper issue. The diplomatic track does not control the key decisions that define the conflict. President Pezeshkian, meanwhile, has largely aligned himself with the broader system without asserting independent leadership. Known as a relatively moderate figure, he has avoided challenging the dominant forces within the regime. His role has been reduced to maintaining internal stability, managing economic pressures, and ensuring that the basic functions of the state continue despite the ongoing war. This sidelining of the civilian government marks a significant shift in how power is exercised during the crisis. At the center of this shift is the growing dominance of the military, particularly the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The IRGC, led by commanders such as Ahmad Vahidi, has emerged as the most decisive force in shaping Iran's actions. Control over critical strategic assets, including the Strait of Hormuz, lies firmly in their hands. Their decisions have had immediate global consequences, from disrupting international shipping routes to escalating military operations across the region. What makes the current situation different from past crises is not just the power of the IRGC, but the extent of its autonomy. In previous years, the guards operated as an extension of the supreme leader's authority. Today, they appear to be acting with a greater degree of independence, setting the pace of events and leaving political institutions to respond after the fact. The pattern is clear. Military action comes first, and political messaging follows, often struggling to keep up. One of the most visible figures to emerge from this environment is Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf. A former commander of the Revolutionary Guards, Ghalibaf has stepped into a prominent role not only within Iran, but also on the international stage. He has taken part in negotiations with the United States, addressed the Iranian public, and attempted to frame the conflict in pragmatic terms. His involvement in diplomacy, traditionally the domain of the foreign minister, highlights the extent to which military-linked figures are now shaping political decisions. However, Ghalibaf's position is far from secure. While he presents himself as acting in alignment with Mujtaba Khamenei, there is little visible evidence of direct coordination. His authority appears to stem more from his connections within the military and conservative networks than from any formal mandate. This reflects a broader trend. Individuals are stepping forward to fill the leadership vacuum, but none possess uncontested legitimacy. Behind the scenes, the structure of power has evolved into something closer to a collective leadership model. According to insiders, Mujtaba Khamenei functions less as an absolute ruler and more as a central figure within a network of decision-makers. Senior military commanders, many of whom share long-standing personal ties with him, play a dominant role in shaping policy. Figures like Mohammad Bagher Zoghadar and Yahya Rahim Safavi are key members of this inner circle, influencing decisions on war, security, and negotiations. This model has both strengths and weaknesses. On one hand, it allows for flexibility and rapid decision-making in a time of crisis. On the other hand, it makes it difficult to establish a clear and consistent strategy. Without a single authoritative voice to coordinate actions and resolve disagreements, the system risks becoming reactive rather than strategic. These internal tensions have already begun to surface. Hardline factions, including supporters of Saeed Jalili, strongly oppose negotiations with the United States, viewing them as a sign of weakness. They have mobilized public demonstrations, calling for continued resistance and even escalation of the conflict. At the same time, more pragmatic voices within the government warn of the severe economic consequences of prolonged war, with losses estimated in the hundreds of billions of dollars. One particularly revealing moment came when planned negotiations in Islamabad were abruptly canceled. Civilian leaders, including the president and foreign minister, supported continuing talks, hoping to ease economic pressure and reduce tensions. However, military commanders disagreed, arguing that ongoing U.S. actions, including a naval blockade and threats of further strikes, made negotiations pointless. In the end, the general's position prevailed, demonstrating where real authority lies. This growing dominance of the military has also reshaped Iran's external posture. Decisions such as closing the Strait of Hormuz, engaging in regional strikes, and managing ceasefire terms have all been driven primarily by the IRGC. Even diplomatic initiatives, including back-channel communications with the United States, appear to require military approval before moving forward. This represents a significant shift from the past, where such decisions were more tightly controlled by the supreme leader and his inner circle of clerical advisors. Despite all these changes, it is important to note that the Islamic Republic has not collapsed. Its institutions remain intact, and it continues to function under immense pressure. The government is still operating, the military remains organized, and the political system continues to manage internal and external challenges. However, the nature of that system has changed. Power is no longer concentrated in a single figure, but distributed across multiple centers, each with its own priorities and perspectives. The key issue now is not whether Iran can act, but whether it can act coherently. The country still possesses significant leverage, particularly through its control of strategic assets like the Strait of Hormuz. But converting that leverage into a clear and consistent strategy has become increasingly difficult. Without strong central coordination, actions risk becoming fragmented, sending mixed signals both domestically and internationally. In Iran's political tradition, coherence is maintained through clear signaling from the top. That signaling provides guidance, reduces uncertainty, and aligns the various branches of power. Today, that mechanism is weakened. Messages are inconsistent, authority is less visible, and different actors are interpreting the situation in their own ways. As the war continues and pressures mount, this lack of clarity could become one of Iran's greatest vulnerabilities. The system is still holding together, maintaining order and avoiding any immediate breakdown. But the deeper question remains unresolved. Is Iran being strategically guided by a unified vision, or is it simply navigating events as they unfold, driven by a loose coalition of powerful actors? In moments of crisis, clarity is not just important, it is essential. And in Tehran today, clarity remains elusive.